You're listening to the Angela Henderson Online Business Show, episode 275. Hey there, you amazing human, and welcome to the Angela Henderson Online Business Show, the podcast that is designed for female entrepreneurs who want to make more money in a way that is in alignment for them. If you're looking for practical advice, proven strategies, and expert insights to help you navigate the challenges of growing your business, then you've come to the right place. Welcome, my friend. I am your host, Angela Henderson, a proud Canadian living in beautiful Australia, and I'm a business coach, consultant, and strategist who has helped thousands of women around the world build successful businesses. Through solo episodes and interviews with successful business owners, industry experts, and thought leaders, you'll get insider insights into what it takes to succeed in today's digital age. Whether you're struggling to scale your business, looking for ways to boost your productivity, or seeking ways to overcome the challenges of being an entrepreneur, this show has everything you need to succeed and more. So subscribe, pop your headphones on, and get ready to creating the business and life you deserve today by allowing the Angela Henderson Online Business Show help you create a winning strategy, develop the right mindset, and build lasting wealth. Well, hey there, you amazing human, and welcome back to another awesome episode of the Angela Henderson Online Business Show. I'm your host, Ange, from Angela Henderson Consulting, where I'm an international award-winning business consultant and coach who helps women around the world make more money by creating a personalized business strategy and mastering their mindset so they can create a business and life they love and want to show up for every single day. Today, I'm so excited to have on the podcast a very, very good friend of mine, a legend in the online space, and she was also a client of mine twice. This amazing human is no other than Steph Taylor. If you don't know Steph, Steph is an online business strategist, and on the podcast today, we're talking about, is launching dead, and should you launch or not launch? In this episode, we dig deep about what is launching, what emerging trends and predictions has Steph been seeing over the last beginning of the year, and what she predicts for the next half of the year. We also discuss the current economic climate and how this is impacting launching. We go into depth about, is launching dead? We also explore how AI is impacting launching, the good, the bad, and the not so, in-betweens. Steph also shares the crucial first steps that she recommends people take when it comes to launching. This episode is jam-packed. Steph and I love to geek out on this stuff, and we talk and talk and talk, but there's just so many golden nuggets in this episode. So sit back and get ready because your mind is going to be blowing. Hey, welcome back to the show, Steph.
Hey, Ange, I'm so glad to be here. I think this is the second or third time now?
It is. I was just thinking about that earlier this morning when I was putting together the questions for this particular episode. I was like, yes, this is your third time on the show. And I'm always just excited to be in your energy, on any given day. But I'm excited to dig into today and discuss launching in 2023, what's been going on in 2023, because things in the online space are changing. And I know that your zone of genius is launching and also just online strategy collectively. So it's great to get your insight over the next 30 to 40 minutes about the scope of launching in the current environment. So I'm rapt to have you here today.
Oh, I'm so excited. I geek out on this stuff. Like I would talk, and you and I talk about this stuff for fun. So I'm actually really glad that we're hitting record and sharing all of this with your listeners.
Yes, we do talk about this. And I know we've got a co-working day coming up together too, where we'll get to geek out together a little bit more. And yes, we're always geeking out on this stuff. It lights us up. And even before we press record on here, we were talking about what are you testing? What are you testing? So we could always, talk people's ears off. But before we get started, as you know, I always like to ask my guests a fun question so that the audience gets to know you a little bit better before we jump into launching and is it dead in 2023? So I know that you love to travel. And funny enough, you didn't even know that I had this question. You're like, oh, I'm getting a bit bored, Ange. I'm going to have to, I've got a few things now planned for traveling. But I know that you have a love of the country, Italy. So I'd love for you to share with the audience, what is the thing you love most about Italy?
Oh, I love this question. Oh, I love the people. Oh, the people and the food. I can't really decide which one I love more. Whether it's, the people watching. There's always some old guy driving down the road in his tiny little three-wheeled truck delivering tomatoes. And then there's, the passionate couple. And there's just such amazing people watching. It's just so stereotypically Italian. But then the food, the food. And I don't even need to tell anybody who's listening about the food because even if you haven't been to Italy, it's pretty hard to not like Italian food.
Mm-hmm. And Italian food, but also you do have a love of wine too. So do you mean you mix people, food, and wine, and it's kind of like this euphoric awesomeness?
And then look, we can also add in the coffee. The coffee's pretty good too. But let's just say the wine and the food and the coffee all just fit under one umbrella. That's cuisine.
And we could also talk about, I mean, you could add a side of madness on there too. Do you mean there'd be some hunk of men too, right? So, I mean, listen, it is like, it's not even a trifactor, it's a quad factor. No, it's not a quad. What would 5 be? A sync factor? I don't know. But yeah, you were killing it when you go to Italy then, Steph. So yay for travel. Now, obviously you've been on the show for 3 times, but not all of the listeners may have been on at the same time listening to the podcast as you were on. So I'd love for you to share with the audience in a super simple way, what do you do for business today?
Yes, so I am an online business strategist. I work with predominantly coaches, experts, course creators to build online businesses that are profitable even when they're not at their laptop, because I think we all start our businesses with this idea of freedom, whatever freedom looks like to you. For me, it's travel, it's being able to pursue hobbies and fun things. For others, it might be to have a few days off each week where they can hang out with their kids at home. Like, we all started for some version of freedom. And then what happens a few years in is you kind of hit the ceiling where you're just pedaling, and you might be making decent money, but when you stop pedaling, the money stops. Supply and delivery stops. So I predominantly work with online business owners to create that business that is more of a self-driving car than a bicycle.
I love it. And in a world where I'm finding more and more also with the women that I'm working with is that freedom, freedom to travel, freedom to go to their kids' dance classes, freedom to just read a book, right, is becoming more and more important to them ever before, even more important than just wanting to make money. And so the fact that, again, you're helping those business owners to create a business that when they can step away, the money's still coming in, I think is a fantastic way for it to go. And if not one of the only ways, do you know what I mean, kind of going, if you want true, like you said, backing away from a laptop and not having your phone attached to you, etc. Now, we're talking about launching today, my friend, and launching can mean different things to different people. So I always just kind of like to start off with, how are you defining, launching, so that we're all kind of on the same page as we kind of head into this episode?
Yes. So for the context of this episode, I'm talking about launches of digital products. So online courses, group programs, masterminds, memberships, those kinds of offers. Not what I'm talking about today is not going to really apply to physical products, and it doesn't really apply to, if you're launching a new service. And when I talk about launching in the context of digital products, what I'm really talking about is the sales process that you are repeating a couple of times. It's a limited time offer, limited time promotional period with a deadline. That's essentially what it is. It's not when you're just putting it out there for the very first time. So does that make sense? Where it's not just that very first time you put that online course out there, but it's like a campaign that you run maybe once or twice a year to make more sales of that online course or other digital product.
Yep, no, absolutely. And that's what I wanted to make sure, because the majority of the people listening are online businesses who are not product-based businesses, but I just still wanted to make sure that we define that really clearly so that everyone's on the same page. Now, at time of recording, we are almost halfway through 2023, and things, are changing up in the online space. So I'd love to know, specifically from a launch space, have you seen any emerging trends, right? And I know you're not a huge fan of trends, but I'm still curious to know what your thoughts are around this. Are you forecasting or predicting anything for the rest of 2023 or even going into 2024, specifically around the launching?
Yeah. So like you said, I'm not big on trends. We've seen over the last couple of years, we've seen all of the different, here's how you can launch with Reels. Here's how you can use TikTok in a launch. Here's how you can do this. Here's how you can do that. All of those trends are really just tactics that you can plug into a solid launch strategy. But if you're missing that strategy, then the launch itself isn't going to work out. And I don't believe that the overarching strategy of what works in a launch has actually shifted that much this year. So if we think about it, a launch is really just a combination. It's a marketing and a sales process. It's that free content, an offer, and a deadline aimed at getting somebody to make that decision, right? Are they in or are they out? And then once we've got that beautiful marketing and sales strategy that goes into that launch, then how we plug in TikTok or Reels or all of the other shiny objects, then we can think about all of that.
Mm.
But first, we need to know, how are we giving our audience everything that they need to make the decision about whether this product is the right fit for them or not before the deadline.
And I also think, like, again, you talk about just having that strategy and that overall foundations, right, that are necessary even before you open doors, and I know you talk often about in your programs about, your launch starts, at least 90 days out, right? And often I think when I think about trends is I think about quick wins, quick fixes, right? Band-Aid solutions. But those Band-Aid solutions, in my opinion, they can work for some people, but they typically can't replicate it again for another launch because that trend has now expired and they can no longer kind of coattail off the back of that trend. So I think that an overall strategy, to which you do with so many of your clients around the world, is necessary for not only short-term but long-term growth. So it's good to hear, again, what your thoughts are about trends. And it's not that you can't use Reels. Do you know what I mean? Reels could be included, but I've seen people who just use Reels to launch, and I have seen some people do really well, do you know what I mean, with it. But I've also seen, though, the majority of people not do so well because they're just using one little, do you know what I mean, piece into something that has no strategy behind it. So
yeah.
Good. Does that make, like, what are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. And something that I do notice with people who are very tactic heavy. So for example, let's say somebody's built a really big audience on Instagram, and they might, do a launch where they're literally just pushing the entire launch on Instagram. They're not doing anything with their email list. They're not doing a webinar. They're just really just promoting this course to their Instagram audience. And it does really well. And they're like, yes, this was a really successful launch. But the reason that launch was successful was probably because they had 100,000 people there waiting for them to literally sell them anything, rather than them buying because it felt like it was the right decision and something that they really needed. And then when that person goes and launches a second time, then they wonder why the second launch wasn't quite as successful as the first one.
And I would also argue in times like that also, those type of buyers is what we would call in the levels of consciousness a reactive buyer, right? So you've got someone sitting there on Instagram and they're like, oh my goodness, this is great. Like you said, they don't even need it, but they're buying it almost because of fear of missing out or there's whatever. And that you also, the risk that I've seen personally is that you also have, guess what? People are going to ask for more refunds. Or people stop making their payments for whatever that is that you just launched. And so again, by having an overall launch strategy, like what you do with your clients, I think is imperative because you've got to know what type of buyers are also going to be buying for you and what's your risk associated with that.
Yeah. And the other thing that I want to add to that as well is those are the launches where we're seeing that hype and that buzz and that excitement. Those are the launches that are the most visible from the outside. So then when somebody comes to me or they come into my program, Launch Magic, they're like, oh, I want to be able to build that kind of hype and buzz around my launch. And I'm like, hang on, that's not actually what sells. That's what you think is a launch because that is what you are seeing on Instagram. But actually there are people who are having really, really, really successful launches where you're not seeing any of that on Instagram. You're not seeing any of the hype and the buzz because their audience is really engaged, but they're silently engaged on their emails, not loudly engaged on social media. And this person's not building up hype. They're not saying, hey, we've just had 60 people sign up today. They're not sharing all of that.
And that's where I think it goes back to that alignment piece, right? It's so often like that, that person who would say, hey, I want the hype like that. But do they really want the hype? Or is it, do you know what I mean, that they want to take someone else's approach and hope that it will work for their success? And that's where I believe that, again, whether or not it's a launch strategy, whether or not it's a business strategy that I do with my clients, whatever that looks like, is it can't be cookie cutter. It has to be in alignment for you. And that's why those silent, do you know what I mean, launches that you're talking about where we don't see the hype are working for people because they're in alignment with what they're doing. It feels right for them. So how important do you think it is in launching for people to really lean into the alignment? Like again, you might not want to hear this, but Steph, I'm not a huge launcher. Do you know what I mean? I just kind of like, I'm not, I just kind of rock and roll and do my thing because it has never really felt right for me. And I get super drained from launching, right? And as a projector in human design, I know that I can do other things for my energy. Like I'd rather do a live event for someone and do like a one-off thing where I can give people a hug and see them than to do, say, like a webinar. But that's just me, right? But I'm in alignment with that. I still make a shit ton of money from doing it, but I do it in a different way. And it doesn't mean my way is wrong or your way is wrong or my way is right or your way is right. But I found what works for me. So how important do you think it is when you're creating these strategies with your clients that the alignment piece kind of is key, do you know what I mean, to build everything else out?
Absolutely. And just on what you were saying, Ange, like just because you don't do a webinar and your launch doesn't look like what we think a launch is supposed to look like, that doesn't mean that you're not launching, because you actually are launching. You're often putting offers out with a deadline, and you're putting cart open emails out, and you're still working towards those launches, right? You've still got that strategy behind them. So even though, like, I would say that you actually are still launching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would, from that perspective, yes, I would say like we're launching always something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's probably not in the webinar per se, or 5-day challenge per se, or I don't know, even evergreen. Do you know what I mean? Like we don't do evergreen, so, but it's, again, we found ways that work for us. And again, there's not a lot of like hopping around. Do you know what I mean? Either. Like, again, you think about Instagram trends and like dancing on that's not me. Right. So we just kind of do our thing. So yes, no, I appreciate you pointing that out, because we are always launching something, but it might not just be in the traditional quote unquote air quotes way.
Yeah. And what you were saying about the alignment piece is incredibly important for some people. Like, I love doing webinars. For me, being able to show up for an hour and be live virtually with my audience is so much fun. Mm-hmm. I would never have said that 5 years ago. I was cringing the first time I did a webinar, which was nearly 6 years ago. I cringed. It was horrible. But that was not from a place of being out of alignment. That was from a place of, oh, this is really scary. So being really clear on, like, am I not wanting to do a webinar because it just feels icky, or is it because I'm afraid nobody will show up, or somebody might ask me a question I can't answer, or somebody might say something mean? I once had somebody on a live tell me that my eyebrow looked like it was missing a piece.
Oh my gosh.
So finding what works for you. Like, I don't really enjoy doing challenges because I find it really hard to maintain my energy for 5 days straight. Yeah. But I can maintain that energy for a 60-minute webinar.
Yeah.
For some launches, I have not shown up on Instagram at all because I just haven't had that extra bit of energy to show up on social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those launches have been fine as well. Like, it hasn't flopped because I just didn't show up on Instagram. Mm-hmm. So really finding out, if you just want to do a launch that has no webinar and is just to your email list, that is fine too. Mm-hmm. But really need to find out what works for you and what is actually in and out of alignment, rather than what just feels scary or feels uncomfortable to your nervous system and your body and your brain, versus what is it that's actually not aligned with you and your gut.
Mm-hmm. No, I love it. And I also think too, like, there's free webinars, that people can do. But I also know with launching, for example, we'll actually test a lot of paid workshops versus, do you know what I mean, a free webinar. What are your thoughts around that? What have you seen?
Yes. So I'm trying to think if we've tested one. No, we haven't yet, but I've seen clients and friends who've tested these. Mm-hmm. And what typically happens is, obviously, you get fewer people into the paid workshop than you would if it was a free webinar.
Yes.
But they tend to convert better. The challenge is teaching enough in the paid workshop where they feel like they've got so much value out of it, but without completely cannibalizing the bigger offer that you are then actually launching.
Yeah. 100%. I would agree with that.
Yeah, it can work really well when there's a small transformation that somebody needs, or a small outcome or a small problem that somebody needs solved, before they can be ready to start the next offer. So, for example, with my course Launch Magic, if I wanted to create a paid workshop, so the course is 12 weeks of launching your offer. If I wanted to create a paid workshop to launch that, I would do the paid workshop on how to create your online course or group program, for example.
Yeah.
So then by the time they get to the end of that, they've now got an online course. Then the next step is for them to launch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I find that in the paid workshops that we do, for example, is that there has to be a transformation at the end of it. It's got to be one piece of it that has to be like, they have to walk away knowing, like, I see a lot of people, like, they'll do like how to train a dog, for example. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, fuck, are you training the dog to piss outside? Are you training the dog to eat a treat and high five you? Are you training the dog to sniff something out? Like, what does that look like? But when I've seen them work well, it's like how to train a dog to sit. Like, people know at the end of that workshop, that's what they're going to tangibly walk away with. I do a 2-hour workshop around how to create your business strategy and goals. Do you know what I mean? Through either mid-year or at the beginning of the year, they walk away tangibly with that. Now, I don't show them all the ins and outs about how if one of their goals is to how to launch. I can't teach them how to launch. Do you know what I mean? For example, in a freaking 2-hour window, but they've still walked away with their strategy and goals out of their head and onto paper. So I believe that you have to be able to show them. Where I see people do it wrong is they may make people pay for something. They're too scared because of ego or scarcity. Don't give people the transformation and then bomb on their launches because people are like, this sucked. You didn't deliver on what you said you were going to deliver.
Or they over deliver and they try to jam everything into the workshop.
Mm-hmm. And then people leave overwhelmed or thinking they don't need anything else because they still have so much more work to do. Right. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, you just screwed yourself. Right. Exactly. So there is a fine balance. All right. So cool. Again, so many questions, so little time, my friend. All right. So I was on a call this last week with my mastermind clients, and we were talking about the economy. And we were talking about specifically in Australia, how we are on our 11th interest rate increase, right? And the buying patterns are shifting slightly, but not completely. I'd love to know collectively, what are your thoughts about this, and what are you seeing, right? With people either buying, not buying from you, with your clients and not clients, because obviously this is going to impact potentially a launch.
Yes. So people are still spending money. Mm-hmm. This is generally what I've noticed with my own business, friends' businesses, and students' businesses. People are still buying things, which is great news. The change, though, is that people are now, they're being a little bit more selective about where they are spending their money. Mm-hmm. And it's not like 2020 when people were throwing cash left, right, and center at things that they didn't necessarily need. Uh-huh. Now people are prioritizing things that are, a really urgent problem to solve or a really painful problem to solve, which means that your offers need to be, the things that you are launching need to be something that is solving a really urgent or specific pain point for your ideal client, something that they want to solve now.
Yes.
And more importantly, your messaging needs to show them how this offer is the solution to that problem and why they need to prioritize spending money on it now. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I have noticed has shifted in live launches is people are sitting on the fence and dragging their heels a little bit longer, where previously people would buy earlier on in a launch because of the bonuses. They're now sitting there until kind of last minute cart close where they're like, should I buy? Should I not buy? Mm-hmm. So there needs to be a little bit more support in your launch to facilitate that decision-making process for your audience. Mm-hmm. And that might look like giving them a decision tree or a quiz. Like that's what I did with one of my launches earlier this year. It was a last-minute edition when I realized so many people were sitting on the fence because they weren't sure if it was the right decision for them or not. Mm-hmm. So I created a little quiz that they could fill out to see if it was a good fit or not. Mm-hmm. It might look like allowing them to book in a 15-minute fitting call so you can address any hesitations that they have. Mm-hmm. So really thinking about it as the process of once doors are open and those emails that you are sending them, those emails are there to help them make a decision. They're not there to get them excited about your offer.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And again, we could talk more about this, but it's your launch strategy starts way before the actual launch starts, right? Absolutely. It's like you're priming your clients, and that's a whole nother podcast episode within itself. But yes. So now my thoughts are similar to yours. My thoughts are that there may be some change in buying patterns. Like you said, for example, they're buying later versus earlier. Do you mean in a launch? But I also agree with you that there's always money to be made. There is always opportunity. And like I said to my mastermind clients in the call, explore how you can be proactive versus reactive in the current client environment, right? So it's like for you, for example, Steph, or I should also say, in addition to be proactive versus reactive, becoming adaptable and being able to pivot too, I think is equally as important. So you notice that, hey, there's lots of people clicking, lots of people interested, but I haven't added a quiz or I haven't added a 15-minute call. Great, I'm going to add this or pivot this for the launch, you know what I mean, to meet what my clients need. I think often our ego gets in the way. I'm not going to do that, or they've seen the sales page, or do you know what I mean? Can't they read or whatever? But it's like sometimes I believe people just want to feel seen and feel heard. And sometimes whether or not it's the quiz that does it, or whether or not like we just tested where we just had like a live hour Q&A where people could just come in and ask me any questions that they have versus doing individual calls, you know, and things like that. There's always a way, but again, be proactive. I see businesses often that they'll message, I need your help now. I need to make more money now. And those are the clients that I'm like, no, man, this isn't going to work, because you want quick fixes, quick wins, because you're in a place of scarcity. You know, try and run from a place of abundance, try and run from a place of being proactive and being adaptable. What are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. Like everything you just said resonated so much with me. So I think about there are two kinds of people that go into launches, right? There are the people who, when the launch isn't going to plan, when people aren't buying, they crumble and they're like, oh, this is useless. Nobody wants it. What's the point? And they give up. Or there are the ones who are like, cool, let me put my detective hat on and find out what's going on, because now I'm on day 1 of Cart Open and I've got a couple more days still, like a week maybe. I've got this time to figure out what's going on and overcome that. And I think about back in Feb, I launched a new offer for the very first time to my audience. And because it was brand new and we didn't really have much insight to work with other than just some basic audience research that we'd done, the messaging wasn't as strong as it could have been. And that left a lot of people in my audience scratching their heads thinking, is this right for me? So I noticed this. I noticed this in the questions that people were asking me. And I actually so my copywriter writes the Cart Open emails for me. But instead of just leaving those emails as is, I actually jumped in and I added an extra 3 Cart Open emails to that email sequence. Because I knew there were new questions that were being asked. There were new objections that were coming up. And the most powerful thing that I added, and feel free to add this to your launches, but I added a little automation so that if somebody viewed the sales page, 30 minutes later, they would get an email saying, hey, I noticed you viewed the sales page and you didn't buy. If you had a look and you decided that this offer wasn't for you, click here and you won't hear about it again until the next time I launch it. If on the other hand, you are still on the fence, here are some ways that you can get your questions answered. And then I gave them, like the option to book in a call, the option to hit reply and ask me a question.
Yep. Perfect.
That made such a difference because it got people off the fence and it helped them to make that decision.
Yeah. And again, it's just like, and we forget that everyone buys differently. Everyone has different circumstances that's going on in their life, right? And you're never going to meet everyone's, needs, but just being mindful and curious and coming up with solutions, it's going to help you to have a more of a successful launch.
Absolutely. And actually coming back to what you said earlier about there's always money to be made, it reminded me of this quote that I heard at Social Media Marketing World last year. Was it last year? Oh my goodness. I don't even know what year we're in. Yes, last year. When people were first starting to really freak out about recession and all of that, right? And I can't remember who said it. I can't credit it back to the person who said it, but I didn't make this up. And the thing was, what are your strengths right now? And what does your audience need from you right now? And that for me sparked so many ideas, because what your audience needs from you right now is probably going to be different to what they needed from you last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. So being flexible and being able to look at those needs and create new offers, tweak or pivot your existing offers and pivot your messaging, all of that is so powerful.
And again, it's not about doom and gloom, but it is about being realistic. We've got to meet people where they're at, right? And if they've got a mortgage and 11 interest rates have gone up, right? We've got to meet them where they're at. It could be that you've got extended payment plans, there's a million different things that we could do. Now, I do want to talk about, so now that we've obviously talked a little bit about what's going on, the current climate, buying patterns, etc. My question is, with all this in mind, is launching dead? I mean, should people even still consider launching with everything that is going on?
I don't think it's dead at all. And purely because launching at its core is just a repeatable system to make sales.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good. Glad we're on the same page, Steph. Do you know what I mean? Glad we're on the same page. Now, another thing that's happening in the world, AI, artificial intelligence. I mean, this little bad boy or girl, do you know what I mean, is taking over the world at the moment. And there are some people freaking out. I'm going to lose my job as I'm a copywriter. I'm going to do this. And it's like, I disagree, right? I think that AI can provide a lot of great things to businesses, but I believe there are still two things that businesses really need to hone in on and focus on. And that is providing connection and providing intimacy with their buyers and also those people who are already in their programs. So I'm curious to know, with the growing emphasis on personalization, tailored experiences, how can women in business and entrepreneurs customize their launches to meet these unique needs and preferences, while at the same time providing connection and intimacy?
Can I talk about the AI for a second first, please?
Yes. Yeah.
Because I have very strong opinions on this one. So I'm in the middle of one of my cohorts for Launch Magic at the moment, and for this round, I've had a lot of people ask, the questions that have come up in the Q&A calls have been, how can we use ChatGPT? How can we use AI in the launching process? Can I get ChatGPT to write me my sales page? And here's the thing, right? The outputs that AI is going to give you are only going to be as good as the inputs that you put in.
Yes, 100%.
So if you can't correctly tell it, these are the challenges my ideal client is struggling with, and this is what's really going on beneath the surface, and please structure it like this. Unless you can brief it really, really well, the sales page that it writes you is going to be really wishy-washy.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to talk about that first. But in terms of connection and creating those personalized, tailored experiences, it depends on the kind of offer that you are delivering, right? So if it's going to be something lower ticket, I think even at least offering some kind of Q&A calls where they do have that connection with you. It doesn't have to be a Facebook group, but having even if it's like one Q&A call with your lower ticket offer, that still gives that human experience. We came out of 2020, 2021 with all of these tiny little $27 products that, I created one and I bought many of them, and I've never touched any of them. And I couldn't even tell you who created half of them because there was never any human connection element to that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very fair that we are craving all of the actual humans. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, if there's more focus even on connection with the others in your cohorts. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yes.
Higher ticket offers are going to need higher ticket experiences. Yeah. Maybe in-person stuff.
And I think, again, higher ticket, do you know what I mean? Yes, I agree, higher experiences, but also just higher touch points, right? Yeah. And I think people forget that, what you pay for is what you get sometimes, right? And I think, I don't know in your experience, but like in the coaching space, for example, they want to pay, let's just say $200 a month, but to get direct access to me and my calendar and my email and my, voice message and text message for $200. I'm like, that's not how it works, right? Like, nope. It's time, you're paying for my time and you're paying for my high touch point. There's other things that I can offer for $200 a month, but it's not directly the same, but there's this assumption out there that we should just exchange our time. And that's where, again, if you think about launching, you don't want to be exchanging your time for everything. You want to be able to back away from the computer and still make more money.
Yeah. I definitely think there's some ways that we can be more creative in the experiences that we offer. So I think about earlier this year, I spoke at a retreat in Tulum in Mexico, and one of the people I met there was this photography business coach called Darcy Benencosa. And I'd never heard of her before because I'm not in the photography space, but we clicked really, really well. She's great. But she was talking about how one of her offers is, so every year she travels to Paris. And while she's over there, she'll deliver like this high-end experience for a client where she'll take them to all of these different locations. She'll take them to like a beautiful cafe and then beautiful spots in Paris and take all of these photos of them while they're there. So at the end of the day, they've not only just had this beautiful experience, but they also now have their social media content for the next 12 months or however long.
So fun. So
right.
Fun.
So that's now she's taken something that's not usually the most fun experience, a photo shoot, and she's put a really high-end twist on it. So that's getting creative with how you can create that offer, right? It doesn't always have to just be, group Zoom calls and what we see everybody else doing. We can make it different.
And again, it's about making it different, but also going back to what our clients want, right? And she would know that the client probably doesn't want, to have to go stand in front of things, but they would want a trip to Paris. Do you know what I mean? They would want to eat croissants and drink coffee, do you know what I mean, at a local cafe shop while looking at a hottie. Do you know what I mean? Who wouldn't want that, right? So again, and that's not going to be for everyone. Not everyone wants that, right? Some people are happy just to go down to the park. But the fact that she's testing that, and that's what I think also is like, so many people think that their launches fail after one go, and then they start to change things and change a million things. But I think people forget about just giving themselves grace, Steph, and that like maybe you just didn't have more eyeballs. Maybe nothing was actually really wrong with the launch or wrong with your offer. It just is that there wasn't enough people looking. But then I see people like go and then we'll create another offer and then launch that. And then what happens is I start to see people confuse their audience about what they have and what they actually do. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think you really raised a very important point there around you need to actually look at the numbers in your launch and not just, when I say look at the numbers, not just look at the number of people who bought or the number of people who showed up to your webinar. We want to look at every single number from the top of that funnel to the bottom of that funnel. And, we want to look at how many people downloaded my lead magnet or how many people viewed the lead magnet download page. How many people downloaded it? What's that as a percentage? How many people viewed the webinar registration page? How many people signed up? What's that as a percentage? How many people showed up live? Well, what's that as a percentage of the people who signed up? How many people were getting my cart open emails? How many people purchased? What is that as a percentage? And only by looking at those percentages can we tell if the launch was successful or not by looking at how many people signed up or how many dollars we made.
And that's the thing.
5 people signing up could be incredible or it could be really bad, depending on how many people saw the launch.
Exactly right. And that's the thing is data doesn't lie. But we get so consumed about money and transactions that we forget to take a step back and look at the data. And then we just start, again, our brain, our mindset, everything starts to wobbly. We run from scarcity and then all hell breaks loose, right? So I'm glad that we brought that up because, again, but data, not just in launches, but your monthly data, how many people are hitting your websites, how many people are listening to your podcast, etc.
Yeah. And sorry, coming back to the data as well, like when you say, 5 people bought, but that was a really good conversion rate. And then somebody might go and create another offer when you're talking about that and they keep going and creating and launching all these new offers. But let's say 5 people bought and that was a conversion rate of 10% of their launch list, 10% of the people who are getting those cart open emails. That's a really great conversion rate. And now that goal then becomes, okay, how can we get this launch in front of more people? Let's repeat it because it's obviously working. And that's when I say launching is a repeatable process because once you get it to that point where it is strategic, it is getting in front of the right people and it's nurturing them to the point where they are ready to buy and it's helping them to make that decision. Once you can reliably convert a certain percentage of those people, you can keep repeating it. And that's when you can start to invest in things like Facebook ads or publicists to get in front of more people, get more people into the launch and sell more.
Yeah. And again, would you agree that people try to do everything at once though too? That like sometimes it's like instead of just eating the little piece of the elephant, they try to eat the whole elephant and actually they do everything kind of half-ass and not really focus on anything and therefore the launch flops also, right? Again, and it's like I always say don't compare your chapter 1 to someone's chapter 30. Right. And it's just like we all have to start somewhere. But I think, again, people are just seeing success online and thinking it happens overnight and they're wanting to do everything. And actually, that's a problem, too.
And thinking, I take one of the first exercises I take my Launch Magic students through is a launch goal setting exercise, because people will come in and they'll say, I want to have $100,000 launch. And I'm like, okay, great. What's the price of your product? Okay, it's $1,000. So we need to get 100 people in. Let's say that you can convert 3% of your launch list. Well, you need, what's that, 300,000? No, oh my goodness, I can't even do math.
I'm the worst
But this
at
is
math.
how many people you need on your email list on your launch list, so not just your general email list, on your launch list, which is people who we know are interested in this particular, they've got this particular problem, they're interested in this particular area. Mm-hmm. We need to have this many people in if you want to convert this many people to get that financial result.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And also a lot of times people just don't have the audience, right? Yeah. It's like, I see, don't get me started on the people. I'm saying like, start a membership. Do you know what I mean? Create a course, do all this. All those things are great. But if you don't have eyeballs to sell to, or you don't have partnerships, do you know what I mean, where they can affiliate for you, or you don't have money for paid ads, the other thing I say is like, you're going to be fucked here, people, because you don't, like, if you don't have people you can't sell to, if you can't sell anything to anyone, you don't make money, and therefore you don't have a business, right? So build it and they will come. Yes, but do you know what I mean? You still need an audience, right? To be able to sell to.
And I think, but on the other hand, I don't think somebody needs to put off launching until they have a bigger audience.
I agree with that. I do agree with that.
Start small. Yes. Start small and then reinvest the profits from your launch into something like Facebook ads so that you can grow that audience more. Yeah. Reinvest, launch again, reinvest again, launch again, reinvest again. That is I started my business with basically no money in the bank. Mm-hmm. And that is how I managed to grow my audience and scale it up over time. Also, being consistent, doing 600 and something podcast episodes to date, doing interviews on other people's podcasts, all of that as well. But it's not been an overnight process.
And I do agree. You don't need a big audience to have a successful launch. I'm talking about people who have like 10 people on their email list, 10 people on social media, and they've bought into this story or belief, do you know what I mean? That they can make millions. I'm like, you still need some amount of people, do you know what I mean, to be able to sell to, but you do that. Bigger does not mean better. Yeah. Okay, before we start to wrap up, I do want to ask one final thing. Launching in the online space is your zone of genius, my friend. So for those people who are wanting to launch this year, those people who are wanting to potentially tweak their launches for what they've already got, or those people just wanting any type of general online business strategy, do you know what I mean, in the online space, where can they find you?
Yes. So best place to connect with me is on Instagram. I'm over there at stephtaylor.co. I also live online at stephtaylor.co. That's my website. But if you want to keep learning from me, Imperfect Action Podcast is where I share bite-sized strategy around online business and launching every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So episodes are usually 10 to 20 minutes long, and they're super actionable, super full of strategy. And you can find me in any of the podcast apps.
Dude, I absolutely love it. And as you know, I always ask one final question, but you've evolved as a human over the years. But my question will still be the same because maybe your answer is different. So my final question is, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you first started off in business?
First thing that comes to mind is failure isn't optional. Failure is a shortcut and it's not optional. And if you're not failing enough, then you're probably not trying enough new things.
Oh, I love it. Failure. Say it again. Failure is not an option. Yes.
Failure is not optional.
Yeah, failure is not optional. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm failing every day, really. Do you know what I mean? But we learn from those and we grow and we pivot and we adapt, right? Yeah. Failure is also happens in relationships. Failure is all around us, right? I often ask my kids, what did you fail in today? And they're like, nothing. I'm like, no, you failed at something, right? But their little minds think that they're perfect. Anyways, that's a whole nother conversation with those two little love muffins. But as always, my friend, it's a pleasure to hang out with you. It's a pleasure to be able for you to share this knowledge with my listeners. A reminder to those who are listening that my team and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode over on the website at angelahenderson.com.au. We'll include all of Steph's links. And as always, don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or Apple so that you can be the first to know of one of our new episodes being released. But for now, my friend, have a beautiful day no matter where you are in the world. And I look forward to you joining me for another episode of the Angela Henderson Online Business Show. Thanks again, Steph.
Thanks, Ange.
Thanks for listening to the Angela Henderson Online Business Show, www.angelahenderson.com.au.